10 minutes. That's all it took for Caitlin Clark to turn the entire WNBA upside down. No official update, no press conference, just one practice session that nobody outside the Indiana Fever locker room was supposed to see. For weeks, fans were left in total darkness. Caitlin disappeared from the court with a mysterious injury. She missed the All-Star game in her own city. The Fever kept completely silent, fueling rumors and frustration. Then out of nowhere, she stepped back onto the court, and what happened in those first 10 minutes sent head coach Stephanie White into shock. Whispers started spreading through the team. Reporters caught wind of it, and now everyone is saying this could be the single moment that decides whether the Fever fight for a championship or watch it all slip away. This is the real story of Caitlin Clark's return. And trust me, it's nothing like you've been told. It started with silence. Caitlin Clark, the face of the WNBA, the player who could sell out an arena just by showing up, was suddenly gone. No warning, no detailed explanation. One day she was lighting up the court. The next, she was sidelined with what the team called a groin injury. But this wasn't just a tweak or a routine rest day. Week after week passed without a single clear update. She wasn't warming up before games. She wasn't traveling with the team. She wasn't even spotted casually shooting in the gym. It was as if she'd vanished from the basketball world entirely. And the mystery only deepened when whispers started surfacing that she'd flown to New York to meet with top specialists. This wasn't a simple rehab assignment. This was something far more serious. The timing couldn't have been worse. The All-Star game in Indianapolis, her city came and went without her. Fans who had bought tickets months in advance, hoping to see their hero, dominate on home soil instead, got an empty spotlight. The arena still roared, but it wasn't the same without Caitlin, the Fever. They stayed completely quiet. No timeline, no reassurance, just an unshakable, frustrating silence. And in sports, silence is often louder than words. That fan base grew restless. Social media boiled over with theories. Some claimed she was done for the season. Others said it was all part of a bigger plan to protect her from targeted, overly physical play. But nobody knew for sure. And then just when people were starting to accept the possibility of a lost season, the first sign of life appeared. But that wasn't the whole story. What happened next would ignite a frenzy. Monday morning in Indianapolis felt different. The air inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse was electric, but tense, like everyone knew something big was about to happen. For weeks, fans had been left guessing. No updates, no timeline, just silence from the Fever. But now there she was, Caitlin Clark. Not in street clothes, not sitting on the bench, but in full practice gear, walking onto the court with that familiar intensity in her eyes. The same look that had torched college defenses and sent her to the WNBA as the most hyped rookie in years. The second she picked up a basketball, the room changed. Conversations stopped. Players glanced over. Coaches subtly leaned forward. Practice footage dropped online by Scott Agnes hit the internet within minutes and instantly blew up. Fever fans desperate for answers dissected every frame. Was she moving normally? Did she look hesitant? Could she really be back this soon? The speculation was instant and relentless. But what the cameras didn't capture was even more important. This wasn't just Caitlin jogging through warm-ups. This was a test. Head coach Stephanie White, standing courtside with her arms crossed, wasn't just watching. She was studying every cut, every jump, every hard stop. The medical staff hovered nearby, eyes glued to every movement. This wasn't an ordinary drill session. This was 10 of the most important minutes of Caitlin Clark's professional career. A pass-fail moment that would determine whether she'd return to the lineup or sit in street clothes for weeks more. And make no mistake, this wasn't just about basketball. Clark had already suffered 3 separate injuries this season. A left quad strain. In May, a groin injury that wouldn't quit in July. Each setback raising the same dreaded question. Could her body withstand the brutal physical targeting she faced night after night in the WNBA? Stephanie White knew what was at stake. The Fever were clinging to 6th place at 12-11. A playoff spot was within reach, but without Clark, their championship dreams were slipping away. So, as Caitlin took the court that morning, everyone was watching for the same answer. Was she ready? The whistle blew. 10 minutes on the clock, no speeches, no easing into it. This was all business. From the first dribble, Caitlin Clark wasn't just back. She was attacking. No tentative sidesteps, no half-speed jogs. She exploded into her first cut, planted hard on the injured leg, and drove straight to the rim. The sound of her shoes squeaking on the hardwood echoed like a statement. Stephanie White's eyes narrowed. She wasn't looking for highlights, she was looking for hesitation. Any tiny flinch, any grimace of discomfort, but there was nothing. Clark was moving, like she had something to prove. She cut through defenders during drills like it was game night, pulling up for a deep three and draining it without even blinking. She fought through screens, stopped on Adam, and launched another swish. The physicality test came quickly. Sophie Cunningham, never one to shy away from contact, bodied up Clark on a defensive switch. It was deliberate, a silent question. "Can you handle this yet?" Clark's response. She lowered her shoulder and went straight through her. No foul called, no complaining, just pure aggressive basketball. White glanced at the medical staff. They didn't move. They didn't signal, just wide eyes as if to say, "She's fine, more than fine." But this was more than just a physical test. This was mental. The psychological hurdle after an injury is brutal. Many athletes come back too cautious, too afraid of the next wrong step. But Clark wasn't playing scared. She demanded the ball in isolation. She tacked the paint instead of drifting to the perimeter. She played through bumps and contact without once looking toward the bench for a sub. In those 10 minutes, she answered every question the coaching staff had, and then she answered a few they didn't dare to ask, out loud. By the time the clock ran out, Stephanie White didn't need a second opinion. She knew. The team knew. Even the players who had been holding the fort, in her absence, knew their leader was ready. And yet that wasn't the end of the story. Because what happened after the whistle would make this comeback even more dramatic. The gym emptied slowly after practice. Players drifted toward the locker room, some joking, some stretching in the corner. But Caitlin Clark stayed on the court, lightly, dribbling, taking a few extra shots. She wasn't ready to leave, not until she got an answer. Stephanie White motioned for her to come over. The head coach didn't speak right away. She just stood there for a moment, arms crossed, eyes locked on Clark, as if replaying every second of the last hour in Hermond. Finally, she spoke. "You look ready." It wasn't just praise. It was permission, a green light. The words Clark had been grinding for weeks to hear. But then White leaned in, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "Listen," she said. "You're cleared, but when you come back, it's going to be where. They're going to test you. They're going to hit you harder than before. And I'm not pulling you after the first bump." Clark smirked. "Good. I'm not asking you to." It was the first time in weeks she sounded like herself again. Sharp, fearless, locked. And the conversation didn't last long. No big emotional speeches, no dramatic handshake, just two competitors acknowledging the same truth. The Fever season was about to change. As Clark left the court, a few teammates caught her eye. Kelsey Mitchell gave her a subtle nod, the kind that says, "Let's go to work." Nalissa Smith grinned. Ivan the rookie stood a little taller. Because everyone in that room knew Caitlin Clark wasn't just coming back. She was coming back angry. And if the rest of the league thought the Fever were dangerous before, they were about to find out what happens when Clark plays with something to prove. Themament word spread that Caitlin Clark was really back. Indianapolis turned electric. Fever fans, who had been cautiously optimistic all month, suddenly went into full-blown countdown mode. Tickets for the next home game against Chicago vanished in hours. Resale prices shot through the roof, some hitting triple their normal value. Outside Gamebridge Fieldhouse, local reporters staked out early. You could feel it in the air. This wasn't just a regular season matchup anymore. This was an event. Sports. Talk radio lit up with predictions. Could Clark really return and immediately play without restrictions? Could she handle the heavy minutes? And most importantly, could she elevate the Fever from playoff hopeful to title contender overnight? The buzz wasn't just in Indiana. Across the WNBA, teams were already adjusting scouting reports. Coaches warned their players, "Clark is back. Expect fireworks." Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the Fever staff treated these final days before a tip-off like a championship week. Clark's practice schedule was carefully mapped. Recovery sessions were booked down to the minute. Even the media requests were tightly controlled. No distractions allowed. But the most telling sign came from the team's locker room. Players spoke less about if they could win and more about how big they could win. That quiet confidence was back. The belief had returned. Clark herself didn't give any grand speeches. Instead, she kept her head down, attacking drills, smiling at teammates, and every so often launching one of those deep threes that made her a national phenomenon. Every time the ball dropped clean through the net, you could almost hear the Fever season clicking back into gear. The city was ready, the team was ready, and somewhere deep down, even the league knew once the ball tipped, nothing in the WNBA would be quite the same again. But as the final hours, before game time ticked away, there was one looming question on everyone's mind. Would Caitlin Clark's first game back be the beginning of a miracle run, or the start of a dangerous gamble? From the moment Caitlin Clark stepped onto the court, Gainbridge Fieldhouse felt different. The roar wasn't just loud, it was deafening. The kind of sound that rattles your chest and makes your ears ring. Fans rose to their feet, holding signs, wearing Clark jerseys, and chanting her name like it was the playoffs. Clark's pre-game warm-up drew as much attention as the actual introductions. Every jumper she took was followed by an eruption of cheers. When she sank a half-court shot during the final drill, it was as if the game had already been won. But the real test came when the ball went up. On the first possession, Clark took the inbound pass, dribbled hard to her left, and pulled up for a deep three. Splash! The crowd exploded. Teammates slapped her on the back, and even the opposing bench exchanged glances. This wasn't a cautious return. This was a statement. Chicago, however, wasn't there to play the role of welcome committee. From the opening minutes, they targeted her physically, bumping her on cuts, crowding her space, testing that groin injury at every turn. It was exactly the kind of defense that had kept her sidelined in the first place. But instead of shying away, Clark leaned in. She called for screens, demanded the ball in isolation, and attacked the rim with the same fearlessness that had made her a phenomenon. The first quarter ended with her having already hit double digits and the Fever leading by a slim margin. Stephanie White barely sat down the entire first half. She barked out plays, rotated her guards to give Clark breathing room, and kept an eagle eye on her movement. The plan was clear. If Clark said she could go full throttle, White was going to let her. By halftime, Clark had racked up points, assists, and one signature highlight. A no-look pass to Sophie Cunningham for a corner three that brought the house down. Sophie pointed at Clark as she jogged back on defense. A silent acknowledgement that their chemistry was alive and thriving. Still, everyone knew the second half would be the real test. Could Clark sustain this pace after weeks away? Could she keep absorbing the hits without breaking down? The answer would come in the final moments, and it would change the entire narrative of the Fever season. The fourth quarter weighed tense enough to make your hands sweat. Chicago had clawed back into the game, cutting Indiana's lead to just 2 points with less than 3 minutes remaining. The crowd was on edge. Every possession felt like it could swing the outcome. Then came the moment the Fever called a timeout. Everyone knew who was getting the ball. Caitlin Clark stood near midcourt, catching her breath. Her jersey soaked through. Stephanie White drew up a play designed for her. But Clark didn't just nod and listen. She told her coach, "I've got it." When play resumed, Clark took the inbound pass, surveyed the defense, and waved off a screen. One-on-one, just her and Chicago's best defender. She dribbled right, crossed back left, then stepped back behind the arc. Time seemed to slow. The defender leapt forward, but Clark was already in the air. The ball left her fingertips, arcing high over outstretched hands. Swish. The arena erupted like a volcano. Fans were screaming, hugging, some even crying. It wasn't just a basket. It was a declaration. After weeks of uncertainty, Caitlin Clark was officially back. But she wasn't done. On the very next defensive possession, she read the passing lane perfectly, intercepted the ball, and sprinted down court. Instead of taking it herself, she dished a no-look dime to Kelsey Mitchell for a dagger three. The Fever's bench spilled onto. The floor in the game was all but sealed. When the final buzzer sounded, Indiana had pulled off a gritty, emotional win. Clark finished with a near triple-double, her fingerprints all over every big play. The post-game press conference wasn't just about stats. It was about what her return meant. Stephanie White called it the spark we've been missing. Sophie Cunningham said, "It felt like the band was back together." And Clark herself, she kept it simple. "I told you I wasn't coming back unless I could go full speed." The victory didn't just put another number in the win column. It changed the entire energy of the Fever season. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about whether they could make the playoffs. It was about whether they could shock the entire league. In just one night, everything changed. For weeks, the Indiana Fever had been surviving, grinding, fighting to keep their season alive without their superstar. But now, they're dangerous again. Caitlin Clark didn't just return to the court, she returned as the heart, soul, and engine of this team. Her presence instantly lifted everyone around her. Passes were sharper, defense was tougher, confidence was contagious, and you could feel it. The Fever are no longer just hoping to make the playoffs. They're chasing something bigger. The league has taken notice too. Opponents who thought Indiana might fade are suddenly rethinking their game plan. Every upcoming matchup from the Liberty to the Aces just became a headline event. Every game is now a battle with playoff positioning on the line. But there's the thing. Caitlin Clark's comeback isn't just about basketball. It's about grit. It's about proving you can get knocked down, counted out, and still rise when it matters most. It's about sending a message that she's not there to just participate. She's here to dominate. The Fever season has been reborn. The momentum is real. And if you think Clark came back just to blend in, you haven't been paying attention. This is her moment, her team, her time. So, the only question left is who's going to try and stop her. Because from this point forward, every team in the WNBA has the same problem. Caitlin Clark is back and the Indiana Fever just went from underdog to contender overnight.